this episode, we will take a look at the ABAP cloud theory of software components and create the software components and structure in the system to slowly begin working for the Recycling Heroes company. At the end, we will synchronize all packages with the GitHub repository. We have already described how software components work and interact with each other in a previous ABAP Cloud article. Here you can find the theory again. You can also find a link to the article in the video description. In software component theory, we assume that we don't do all development in one package, but rather structure functions and applications according to different components. These components include, for example, the various apps, interfaces, Fiori deployments, test components, and released components. This makes it immediately clear what I can find where in the software component when I start analyzing it or want to get an overview of a software component. The lower part of the article describes exactly what the different packages do. There you will find further information on why we want to keep the different components separate from each other. Let's first look at all software components we want to create. We will create one software component for the core and one for the processes. Most of the processes are contained there. Another component for the entire topic of finance, since we want to separate the finance area from the process area. In between you will find the various packages for the applications we are planning. An application can be a Fiori, a business configuration, or an application job. We also define the various packages for the tests, reusable components, and so on. Next, we will take care of creating the packages in the system. To do this, we first need 3 software components that should reflect our structure. To create the software components, we can access the launchpad via the system and the corresponding properties. Under the ABAP development area, you will find the link to the system's launchpad, as we are working on the ABAP environment. There we go to the administration area and the Manage Software Components app. There we filter for the software components that don't currently exist. Using the Create button, we can create a new software component. We give it a name and a description, and then we create the component. To make the software component available in the system, we need to clone it. Cloning creates the corresponding transport route and structure package in the system. We will now perform this process for the process component. The majority of the applications and processes we will implement later should be located in the process. Let's perform the cloning here as well. Depending on the system, it may take a few seconds for the component to be cloned. Finally, we create the last software component, which is intended for finances. Before we leave the app, we get an overview of all 3 components. Once all 3 software components have been created, we can return to the system. Now we add the created packages to our favorites. To do this, we can go to the Favorite Packages folder and right-click to search for the packages using the context menu. Using the ZRH abbreviation, we find the corresponding structure packages that were generated in the system. Next, we create the sub-packages in the core area. The structure of the packages is always relatively similar. At the first level, you will find the rough subdivision of the packages. For example, app for all applications, jobs, and business configurations that we built. There's a Fiori package for this. In the Fiori package, we would normally deploy the application later, but also create things like IAM app and business catalogs. In the reuse area, we find components that are shared between the various applications, but are generally not released across software components. The share package will later contain components that we will assign a C1 contract to and release it to other software components. In a test package, you will find corresponding unit tests and test components that were not developed directly on an object, such as a unit test for core data services, for example, or the call for individual functions. Here we will create similar packages as we did for the core. The main difference here is the package of applications and apps. Since we provide other applications here, and these are even larger, it's important to understand again that a separate transport is required for each software component. Behind the software component lies its own transport layer and Git repository, and the objects therefore cannot be transported in one transport. This is different on on-premises systems and primarily affects the ABAP environment we are working on here. In the third and final step, we create the finance area. Here, there are standard packages again, but for example, no shared package, but instead a package for interfaces. Interfaces to other systems and services are planned later to enable integration. Once we've finished creating the packages, we can back up everything via GitHub. To do this, we first create 3 new repositories in GitHub. You can learn how to create a repository in another YouTube video of ours about integrating ABAP-Git. You can find a link to the video in the video description below or on our channel. In this case, we will define the repository as private since we don't want to make it visible to other GitHub users for the time being. Once again, initialization via the README file and a descriptive description are important. We then switch to the ABAP development tools and link the repositories to the corresponding packages we've created. After linking, we can synchronize the object to the repository. This way you can follow every change we make with the tutorial and track the progress in the various commits. Finally, we will check GitHub to see if the corresponding package structure have arrived and are reflected in the repository. In the next video, we will begin creating the first part of the data model and the first application, which we will examine in more detail step by step. Thanks for watching and see you next time.